It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. We've got an interesting show for you today. We're going to be talking a little security, and we're also going to be talking a little bit about U of L research. Coming up in the second half of the show, we don't hear much about it, but AIDS has become a big, deadly problem in Vietnam, resulting in grandparents raising a lot of children. A researcher from U of L's Kent School of Social Work is doing research on the phenomena. She'll be here to talk about it and how that impacts us here in the U.S. But first, the University of Uoll has one of the safest college campuses in Kentucky, according to crime statistics. But like any small city with a huge concentration of people, crime does occur at U of L. And the well-trained police officers in the U of L Police Department are the ones who investigate those crimes and, perhaps more importantly, help put measures in place to keep students, faculty, and staff safe. Colonel Kenny Brown and Major Aaron Graham from the U of L Police Department are here to talk today about crime prevention, some of the tough issues facing college campuses, including U of L. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are we doing?
We're doing fine. How about you?
Well, I think I'm all right. Best I can tell right now. You haven't slapped the cups on me yet, so I guess that's a good thing. Let's talk a little bit about some of the safety measures. There were a number of them put into place last school year, I think, and there are a number of them still on campus that you guys keep doing on campus this school year as well. What are some of the safety things that are happening on campus, safety initiatives for students and faculty and staff on the U of L campus?
I guess probably the biggest one's probably the L Trail, and it's basically the sidewalks that walk through U of L. They have highlighted them, they've marked them as the L Trail, and that makes for a good, well-lighted area to go in and about campus on.
And that's right through the guts of campus, right?
It is. It's right through campus, and we have officers that walk and bike through there to make sure there's an extra presence on those trails.
That's Colonel Kenny Brown. Aaron Graham?
Yeah, and then one of the other things along with the L Trail is also here in the North Corridor, actually where the studio is actually located, we have designated officers on all three shifts that predominantly pay attention to this area. So that's the Cardinal Town area, all the dorms that are in this area as well, and the businesses associated with this area. And so that gives them a person that they can count on throughout the day, throughout the night, that they can go to without directly having to call our main number. They know that there is an officer that is aware of the situations that occur here and that they have a good rapport with.
So that's just north of campus, I guess, north of the main Belknap campus. So the bottom line is that ULPD is extending beyond just the boundaries of the U of L campus, correct? You guys patrol areas that other students might habitate, apartments and other things around U of L, correct?
That's correct, and we try and pay attention to this area up in here because this is a major housing area and it has a lot of students that are out 24/7. And one of the initiatives that Aaron was talking about is our zone resource officers, and those officers get out on foot. They go in and out of the affiliated housing, in and out of the dorms to pay a little bit extra attention, to talk to the folks who are manning the dorms, who keep an eye on the students, so that we have good communication between them, because a lot of times they know what's going on too.
We also heard something about, in recent weeks, a little more about the escort service that the University of Louisville Police Department offers. What is that to students who want to use this escort service? Tell us what that is.
Well, the escort service it's actually been in existence for, I would say, at least 15 plus years. And it is provided by the University Police Department and in some aspects by parking itself that assist us. But it's an escort service in the fact that if you need to get from point A or any place that originates on campus to anywhere 4 blocks beyond campus, you call the police and we will provide that escort, either with one of our designated security officers who serves as a driver or from one of our actual on-duty police officers. And it operates between the hours of roughly sundown to sunup.
That's Aaron Graham. We're talking with Aaron Graham and Kenny Brown from the U of L Police Department about safety measures on campus and what they do with the U of L Police Department, how they help out students, faculty, and staff. What is the average age, or if you have it, of the police officers on the ULPD force, and how many officers are there? I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think most folks understand that these are officers that have a lot of experience that come to U of L and work here.
As opposed to saying the average age, we try to go by
Experience.
average years of service.
Okay.
We
So-
have a seasoned police department.
Bunch of old guys, is that what you're trying to say?
Well, not quite.
Right. So average length of service or years of service is about 25. We're up to 25 years for the entire department. So what you get with that are we're bringing the experience that we've had over a course of a career lifetime. And we've all had various positions and jobs wherever we came from before we started with the university, and we're bringing that experience as well.
Like Aaron's former Louisville Metro, Kenny's former Jefferson County Police, and you came to UofL and you got plenty of experience, and there are a number of other officers that have the same, is the bottom line, right?
Yeah, Mark, we like to say we recycle police officers. As our new officers reach 3 years, they tend to gravitate toward Louisville Metro, and when Louisville Metro gets done with their officers, when they've retired, we bring them back. So it's a continuous recycle. I guess we're a green police department.
Green Police Department. And why is that a benefit, do you think, to the University of Louisville?
Well, I think as Aaron said, you've got the experience. You've got a lot of guys who have been had great careers with another law enforcement agency who bring so much to the table, whether it's investigations, patrol, traffic, command, whatever.
And how many officers does ULPD have?
We have 45 sworn officers now.
Okay, and they're, I guess they work 24 hours a day, as they any other
We
police
are
department
essential
would.
university employees, so we get no breaks.
You
So-
look essential, Aaron.
We are essential.
All right, let's talk about a little bit tougher issues here. The crime numbers on U of L's campus. And I think, Aaron, you do that report for the feds, as I recall.
Right, we're in that
What are
phase
we
right now.
talking about in terms of the number of violent crimes and other crimes on our campus, and how does that compare to other college campuses, urban college campuses our size?
We do compare ourselves to various universities, essentially urban universities, and we're right in line, and in most cases, we're actually a little bit lower than a lot of the other universities. And I just point out we compare ourselves to University of Pittsburgh, University of Kentucky, University of Alabama, Birmingham. So they're all of similar size and similar urban environments. And we generally run a little lower, or in most cases, right at the same level.
Okay, so right in the ballpark. We're in the middle of the road, and the amount of crime that we have on U of L's campus.
And each campus is a little bit different. So in terms of violent crime, we are on the low end of almost every university that is similar to us, that we may make a comparison with.
And how is it determined whether the U of L Police Department investigates a crime or Louisville Metro investigates a crime, if it's in or around campus? How's that work?
Well, normally, we always investigate all of our crimes that occur actually on the campus, within the campus
Within the
boundaries.
boundaries,
Yes.
okay.
Now, there are some exceptions where we have something that occurs just right off campus. Sometimes our officers will respond, take the report, and we'll send it to one of our investigators. But normally, those crimes are investigated by the Louisville Metro Police if they're just off the boundaries.
Okay, so you're talking. Go ahead, Aaron. I'm sorry.
And then the only crime that we do not investigate, or we would not investigate it should it occur, would be a homicide. That's the only one that we would not. That would be solely, we would have to call in Louisville Metro on that.
And what's the relationship with LMPD? It's been good over the years, I know. How do y'all work together? I know Aaron used to be an LMPD officer, and there are a number on U of L's force. So does that help the relationship with the district that's here in South Louisville?
Sure it does. For one thing, just like Aaron came from Louisville Metro, you can call Louisville Metro and call people by first name basis. You can get those resources when you need it. And we maintain a good working relationship. We have quarterly luncheons with the chief staff, with the command staff of the 4th Division, which covers Belknap, the 1st Division, which covers the HSC campus. So we're continuously in contact, which really makes it good when you do need something.
I'm talking with Aaron Graham and Kenny Brown from the U of L Police Department. We're talking about campus safety and some of the security measures being taken by the University of Louisville, and some of the other perhaps more controversial issues that have impacted college campuses across the country. And one of those is sexual assaults on campus. As you guys know, there have been a number of schools that have been taken to task for what is at least perceived to be their lack of investigation and taking sexual assaults seriously. What happens on our campus when a student walks in or feels he or she has been sexually assaulted? How does it work on U of L's campus between the counseling services, police, LMPD? How does it all work? Aaron?
Well, if it occurs on campus, there's an entire mechanism that's already set up in place that involves not only the police department, but the Peace Center, counseling services, the Dean of Students office, HR if it's necessary. So there's a group of people that are actually working in conjunction to make sure that it is investigated. And at that point, what we try to make sure that everybody understands is that, or at least the victim understands, is that here are your options, this is what you can do. And everybody's very patient to make sure that they understand exactly what it is that can be made available to them, what their options are, and what can happen. And that means not going from this typical criminal investigation to an administrative investigation conducted by the university, the counseling services that are available to them not only from the university, but through the city at large, through the Center for Women and Families. So there are a number of options, and the key thing that we've always wanted to make sure is that they have the support, and that whatever their decision, that is what we're going to try to make sure is fulfilled.
And go ahead, Kenny.
I was going to say, on top of that, it is, as Aaron was saying, it's a team effort. And if we have a student who's been sexually assaulted, and maybe it didn't occur on campus, maybe it occurred right off campus, we're still there to kind of shadow the investigation to assist on whatever that student may need. And we'll tie in the resources that Aaron talked about with Peace and the counseling service and the Dean of Students if need be.
And a lot of times those students walk into a counseling service, and that's their first point of contact. They say, hey, I was raped last night, or I was sexually assaulted, but may not want to report that to police. So I guess that's an option, right? I mean, they don't have to. If they decide, hey, I don't want to report this, that's an option to them.
That is an option, that they do not have to make a report with the police. They don't have to go through with any kind of prosecution. However, because of our reporting standards, we still get that information. So we know that it actually took place. And that information will be given to us, but there will be no name associated with it, and there will be no further action on our part.
So the key there is they're anonymous, right?
Yes,
That's correct.
And we've designed our reporting system where we can do an anonymous report and even collect evidence, and we will hold that evidence for, I believe, 365 days at this point, store it in case that person changes their mind. So, and we label everything Jane Doe.
Right. Or John Doe.
Or John Doe.
Or John Doe.
Jane or John Doe. What do you tell parents and students when they first come onto campus? Is there something that they get, or freshman students, or they're told during the whole recruitment process about safety, and here's some tips, and here's how to get a hold of the police, or how does that work?
Aaron's our face here.
Aaron's the face of
Yes.
the training.
Actually,
huh?
yeah, the freshman orientation is conducted over a course of months. And a good portion of that is talking to the parents and assuring them that their student is going to be very safe here. And what we try to do is we give them as much information in terms of the statistics, what's available, and then the resources that are available to them, and what we will provide to them as a department ourselves in terms to ensure that they are safe. But the key thing, what we try to make sure that they understand, is the fact that this area within the city itself is probably one of the safest. And we can point that out, and we can point that out with hard numbers, and that usually makes them understand that they're making the right decision by having their student attend here.
I think that surprises a lot of people when they see those numbers, that this really is one of the safest places you can be in the city of Louisville,
Right.
on the UofL campus.
And one of the key ones I always bring out is that we let them know that the number one crime that we deal with is theft. And in a calendar year, here at Belknap alone, we only deal with maybe 175 to 180 thefts. So if that's our number one crime, and that's the number that we're dealing with, they realize with a group of 22,000 plus people in this area, then we're not talking about a lot of crime.
And that's
at all.
computer laptops and
Laptops, bicycles,
Yep.
cell phones.
Yep, I got you. All right. What's the rule for alerts? When does the police department decide to send out an alert to all the students and faculty and staff on campus about a crime that's been committed? How do you decide when to do that?
Well, if it's imminent danger, it's sent out right away, and then we look at other options. And if you want to talk about that, Aaron.
The key thing.
Imminent danger meaning there's still somebody loose. Something
It's
just
an immediate
happened.
threat. It's an immediate
There's an
threat.
immediate
Armed
threat.
robbery just happened near the corner of Cardinal
Subject
and
ran
Floyd.
toward
And
the
if
campus.
it's coming toward our campus, or it's still on our campus, or we have reason to believe that the person who committed the crime is on campus or heading toward our campus, that is interpreted as an immediate threat.
Or it could be
So-
something like a fire.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
So, and any kind of weather emergency. So those are all the immediate threats to the campus. That determines the alert system. And anything else, if is basically on a case-by-case basis. So what we would normally look at is, for example, if there's a series of crimes that are occurring in the adjacent areas, and we receive that information from Louisville Metro, then we can put that information out as well. That wouldn't go out as an alert, but it would be sent and disseminated by another method
Kind
to
of
the
a
entire
bulletin
community.
or
sort of a bulletin,
informational bulletin, something like
a
that?
safety bulletin, just making sure that people are aware.
Okay. But the only time you really send out a rave, what we call a rave alert, is if somebody's on campus, near campus, there's a fire, something happening right then that you need to warn people of.
That we think poses a threat to the community at large.
So that the community can take an immediate action.
Okay. And as we wrap up here, police tips to students. What would you tell students in terms of keeping themselves safe around campus, parties on Friday and Saturday nights, those kinds of things? What do you tell them?
Well, I would tell the students what I would tell my daughter when she was here. Be aware of your surroundings. You have to understand what's going on. Make sure that you walk in pairs. If you go to a party, make sure you're there with somebody that you know and take care of each other.
And given the other thing is that we have a number of tools that are available. Download the Rave Guardian app, which gives them a whole series of tools of both interactive communication and emergency notification if they need to get in touch with us.
And they're easy to use. It's easy to use as well.
Very
I've got
simple
that
to
on
use.
mine, yeah. How many students have done that? How many, do you know? How many?
Not as many as there should be.
Really?
Yes, it's very low numbers, and we've made several efforts to try and do that. And this is a good forum to talk about it, as Aaron just did, to try and get more people to sign up.
And we
Well,
did
not just students, but faculty and staff as well.
faculty
Sure.
and staff as well. So I haven't had a chance to look at the numbers since we've begun this semester. We're going to take a look at it again, but just anecdotally, I think that we've seen an increase in the number of people that have actually used it
Good.
or actually downloaded it and or utilizing that.
All right. Aaron Graham, Kenny Brown from the UofL Police Department, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Stay out of
you.
trouble.
Thanks for the forum here, because it is. Safety is important.
All right, very good. In front of me is Lesley Harris. She's a professor of gerontology specialization in the Kent School of Social Work, and she's been studying the impact of AIDS on Vietnamese families, especially children. And she's here to talk about her research as well as a student learning trip she took to Botswana. Right?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Glad
I'm
you're
so
here. Glad you're
excited to talk about this work.
All right, well, let's talk about your work. You've been
Sure.
working with families that have been struck by AIDS in Vietnam. How did you get started on that research?
Well, I started in 2009 during my dissertation work at UCLA, and I was able to partner with an international NGO called Save the Children, and they were launching new programs for grandparents who are raising grandchildren, also known as skip generation families, in northern Vietnam, where the rates of HIV are incredibly high. In fact, it's HIV in Vietnam is considered to be a concentrated epidemic, meaning that in certain areas of the country there's extremely high prevalence in rates, and then other parts of the country, there's virtually none. So in this particular region of Vietnam, which is in the north, Hanoi and Haiphong, there was an incredible amount of death that happened in the year 2007. So international NGOs came in to really deal with some of the aftermath and try to start social support programs for grandparents who are raising grandchildren because the middle generation had passed due to AIDS.
Right, so you talked to the skip generation.
Yes.
So I guess the gut question here is, were there just a bunch of orphan children, for lack of a better term, that were left without their moms and dads because you had a huge number of them dying from AIDS in North Vietnam?
Well, I would say sort of mixed, because the cultural context of Vietnam is that multiple generations live within one household. So it's very common for grandparents, parents, and grandchildren to live in the same households to begin with. So what ended up happening is really two things. So when the middle generation passed, households were left with just the older and younger generations. But there also were a lot of what's considered to be double orphans. So orphans without grandparents or parents due to HIV/AIDS. So something that the international NGO community is really starting to invest in, because traditionally a lot of the HIV care and work has been aimed exclusively at orphanage care or prevention amongst teenagers and adolescents, is saying, well, why don't we try to move away from more institutionalized care like orphanage settings and try to invest more into bolstering these fragile households who have lost really the economic engine of their family, which are the parental generation who cares for their parents and their children at the same time. And the context is really interesting in northern Vietnam because it's the geopolitics of the area are interesting in the sense that it's a northern coastal city. So a lot of young men will travel from rural areas and communities and get jobs on the boat ships, or the ships that transport things from Hong Kong and other parts of Asia. And so Vietnam is situated in the golden triangle of illicit opiate production. So the young men that were taking these trips and working on in the seafaring communities were exposed to injecting drugs and actually transferring opium back and forth. So often we're taught to inject drugs and heroin on the ships and became addicted, and then we're needle sharing. So injection
and that's what
drug
boosted
user.
the AIDS among the families in the northern part of Vietnam.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily sexually transmitted; it was through needle use, right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
In the
I don't think
north,
people know about this. You know, we always hear about AIDS in Africa. I don't think I've ever heard of AIDS problem in Vietnam, in the northern part of Vietnam.
Yeah, and I think that's because it is such a concentrated epidemic there. And so what that means is that only really at-risk populations are impacted. So number one is injection drug user, number two are female sex workers, and number three are men who have sex with men. So amongst the general population, the risk is not that high. So sometimes in more marginalized or at-risk populations, I think the story is not as heavily promoted.
We're talking with Lesley Harris, who's from the Kent School of Social Work. We're talking about her research in Vietnam on these families that were basically busted up by AIDS and how the grandparents held them together. So your research was what? What did you focus on in this whole mess? I'll call it a mess, if that's okay.
So sure. So from 2009 to 2012, I focused on doing ethnography, which is trying to understand really the thick and rich description of what context and meaning, how context and meaning are generated for this family around HIV, so around skip generation families. So I was hired by Save the Children to really go out into rural communities and interview families and also live with families for periods of time for about 5 days to observe what their daily lives were like, what their challenges were like, and also how grandparents, the older generation, made meaning of HIV as a disease. So the reason for that was that directly impacts how willing people are to get their grandchildren tested for HIV. So
did they take it seriously? Did the grandparents in Vietnam take it seriously, or did they kind of shun, for lack of a better term, the whole idea of their children getting tested and just ignore it?
Well, it depended on the situation, which was really interesting. So in the rural communities where I would literally go into villages and walk from family to family where they had lost moms and dads to HIV and AIDS, grandparents had less access and resources to HIV testing, but were more open about it because an entire small community had lost that middle generation. So stigma was not as high. But when I interviewed grandparents who were in urban communities, they were living more in secret and were more reluctant to get their grandchildren tested because they didn't want their neighbors to find out. Because in Vietnam, it actually directly impacts children's abilities to go to school. So if their grandchildren were in fact tested positive, they might be kicked out of school or by other parents in their school system. So it was a very complicated, nuanced situation. And then since 2012, I've actually studied an intervention that has been started in Vietnam called empathy clubs. So as another way to combat and offer support to grandparents and skip generation families, a lot of NGOs have started empathy clubs, which are kind of a combination of social support clubs clubs, but also they focus on education for grandparents on HIV. They also do health checks, household food security to try to make sure these households have enough food. And they also offer a lot of support for what's known as orphans and vulnerable children. So they also have a lot of youth programs as well. So I studied the impact of those clubs.
Are they working?
Yes. And in fact, we just actually completed a study last summer on this where we compared a group of grandparents who were involved in the clubs to those who were not. And we found that they ranked incredibly high, despite being incredibly more low income than grandparents who are not participating. Yes, they're a lot poorer households, but they had better household food security. They were more civically engaged in their community. They had better access to health checkups. And most importantly, I think they had better access for healthcare for their grandchildren and had 100% HIV testing rates, whereas the group that we looked at who were not involved in the clubs, 50% had never had their grandchildren tested for HIV.
What can the rest of the world learn from this? What happened in Vietnam?
I think, there's these interesting, I think particularly in the U.S., outbreaks that are happening with HIV, particularly the one in Scott County in southern Indiana and in rural parts of Washington State, for example. So I think that truly trying to understand the cultural context that surrounds an HIV outbreak and epidemic is incredibly important, and how that impacts the way people view getting HIV testing and prevention and care and access to antiretroviral therapy. So I think one of the global messages is that a lot of HIV outbreaks are different, and the context matters, and it matters in terms of how open people are about maybe potentially being at risk for HIV, and that really can either prevent the spread of HIV or keep people educated and supported in their care.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're going to totally switch gears here on you, Lesley
Sure.
Harris from the Kent School of Social Work. You also took some students to Botswana, I think, in the last semester or over the summer. Tell us about that trip and what was the purpose? Well,
it was wonderful. It was actually an opportunity that kind of fell in my lap through the International Service Learning Program, or ISLP program, here at UofL. It's an interdisciplinary program, so we took students not only from my school, the Kent School of Social Work, but from sports administration, geography, public health, and engineering. And so we worked in the school system in Gaborone, Botswana for about 2 weeks, but it was equal parts service and learning. So the students spent a semester creating a curriculum. My students focused on bystander intervention or anti-bullying in the schools, which was a request of the school administration. And then we worked with the students, but the engineers did a different activity. They worked on bridge building, and the geography students worked on climate change. So we also spent the semester getting together as teams. So we worked in 3 different schools and then cross-trained each other on our unique curriculums. And so we implemented the curriculums in the school system, but then we also had a lot of learning opportunities for our students because we wanted it to be equal parts service and learning. So our students also met with college students at Boto University. We had cultural tours of the city. We spent time in markets and working with community leaders and the school administration. We actually had a radio show or a TV show done for the students on our final days, which we brought together some of the students, leaders that emerged from the group and the school administration and the students that talked about this unique experience and what it meant to them.
Lesley Harris from the Kent School of Social Work, appreciate it, and go Cards.